Hello and welcome to the Superposition Guys podcast. My name is Yuval, and my guest today is Daniel Volz, co-founder and CEO of Kipu Quantum, a software company working to accelerate the delivery of quantum advantage. Daniel and I talk about what Daniel learned about quantum at McKinsey and BASF, their optimized approach to quantum algorithms, the expected timescale for quantum advantage, and much more. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Hello, Daniel, and thank you for joining me today.
Yuval, very glad to be with you today, and thanks for having me.
So, who are you and what do you do?
I'm Daniel. I'm a chemist by training, recently turned CEO of a quantum computing startup, and we actually want to bring early quantum advantage to industrial end users by being application specific and hardware specific.
And in terms of background, I think that you were originally at McKinsey and then at Bosch, um, doing some or a lot of quantum in both of these locations. What have you learned about the needs of users and quantum technology in your journey to Kipu Quantum?
Yeah, so you're correct. I worked with quantums in my past two jobs already at McKinsey and BASF, actually, a large chemical company in Germany. What did I learn? I think the first learning, and this was mainly drawn out at McKinsey already, where I looked at quantum in an across industry perspective, was mainly this massive economic potential. So back then, I've been looking at all kinds of different industrial users with from very different industry verticals like finance, logistics, chemicals, of course, which is my home industry still, pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, etc. And essentially, no matter where we looked, you could really identify these disruptive use cases. And from that point on, it was very clear that there is this massive value potential that quantum computing, if it becomes mature enough, can actually bring to these industry verticals. Um, what I learned at BASF specifically, where I built up the quantum effort together with a great team of colleagues, is that the users are really incredibly diverse. So if you think about it, all the different kinds of things you could do with quantum, at BASF alone, we found about 100 or so of different use cases. Users have extremely diverse backgrounds. So I think this is always something to keep in mind. Of course, mostly they have a problem, they want it solved, but this can be people doing controlling and so just people with a bread and butter business background, can also be theoretical chemists and in some cases even quantum physicists, which have been hired recently by a lot of the advanced users. So whatever product comes online needs to cater to these needs. And maybe a third learning, and this was somewhat sobering at BASF, is that quantum advantage with all the conventional approaches is, I think, somewhat out still because there is still a lot of work to be done, both on the hardware as well as the algorithm level, to make this great potential a reality and to start actually doing something meaningful.
I read the press release of your funding. Congratulations, by the way. And
Thanks
I
for that.
think it mentions that you're making a claim that you could deliver quantum advantage sooner. On one hand, I'm very happy to hear that quantum advantage could come sooner. And on the other hand, I'm very curious. How can you do that?
So if you look at today's hardware, we have a number of qubits that depends on the system in the order of maybe 100 if we're just considering gate-based quantum computing, give or take. Some platforms less than 100. If we're adding annealing, we are in the thousands, more or less. All of the conventional approaches, if you're targeting towards fully fault-tolerant quantum computing, you really need a number north of 1 million qubits to do something meaningful, because want to have error correction. You will have that massive overhead of physical qubits that are going to be busy forming logical qubits to essentially prevent these error issues. And reason for that is that the current quantum computers are, as I said, small and have also a lot of noise yet. But we realized, and this is mainly the work of one of my co-founders, Enrique Solano, who is a former professor with more than 2 decades of research track record in quantum computing, essentially, is that you can shrink down these numbers and these requirements if you're actually hardware specific. So what we are kind of sacrificing in order to deliver on that claim is the notion of having a hardware agnostic algorithm. And this was more or less the talk of the town when I started my own journey in quantum back in 2017, 2018. Everybody was claiming that hardware agnostic algorithms are the thing to get, and if an industry users would have that, they can pay for it today, and then they would just need to wait until the hardware catches up, and then they can essentially start solving problems. We think that this is not going to work because even if the number of qubits is doubling every year, it's still going to take a while until we are north of 1 million qubits. So that's not something for the near term. And instead, our technology is essentially geared towards delivering algorithms that are very specific towards a certain problem and adjusted towards a specific hardware setup, a certain hardware machine, actually, to be precise. And with that, we can more or less cut away some of the overhead. We don't require error correction, and we can essentially start solving meaningful problems much, much sooner than the fault-tolerant quantum computing paradigm.
In this specific hardware that you mentioned, is it still a gate-based computer, or is it an analog computer, or is it a quantum-inspired algorithm? What kind of hardware are you anticipating to run this on?
So we are partnering up with the hardware manufacturers working on gate-based quantum computing. Um, the technical one of our two technical columns we're standing on is digital analog quantum computing. So it's essentially a mix between analog and digital quantum computing. We are using native gate operations. We are using analog building blocks that, of course, require some more tinkering in our algorithms, but we think that it's actually worth it because doing so really cuts away a lot of overhead. And right now, hardware is great, and there's super cool improvement happening every year, essentially. But we are still limited by the numbers of gates we can run. And saving there is, I think, really worth it because it can bring quantum advantage earlier towards present day.
You mentioned chemistry, and I think VQE is one of the popular algorithms in chemistry. So if you take VQE and you make it, as you mentioned, hardware specific to a particular machine, how much of a savings can you get? Is it 10% fewer gates? Is it 10 times fewer gates? What can you give me an order of magnitude there?
And that kind of depends on the problem. It can be several orders of magnitude, depending. I think what's also relevant to understand is beyond the digital analog element, we have also something else which is called digitized counter-diabatic quantum computing. So that's more or less a digital only compression tool, which would take an algorithm like VQE, for instance, and again cut away the number of required gate operations, as well as lower the amount of classical pre-processing overhead to essentially get the problem done. So it's really orders of magnitude. And if you translate this into how much sooner for an industry users, it's essentially many years, of course, depending on problem size and the pace at which the hardware development is going to progress.
Now, that reduction in the number of gates or the resources in general, is that done automatically? I'm thinking about the recent Nature article where Alpha Tensor found a better way to multiply matrices. Is that the sort of work that you're doing, or is it more of manual adjustment to the algorithm and going in and say, well, if I have this hardware and this algorithm, then I can save a little bit here and a lot more there, and so on?
No, I think, it's more towards doing this in an automatic way. Of course, if you would just work long enough with a given hardware setup, you could find all kinds of way, and people are doing this. This is also a valid effort. Unless we achieve quantum advantage as an industry, we need to squeeze out every optimization potential we can. But it's not about tinkering and squeezing out incremental advantages by cutting corners or by optimizing something by hand. It's more or less finding systematic ways of doing so. And of course, this requires some sophisticated machine learning technology and a lot of proprietary techniques, which essentially help us to do both our universal compression, but also the kind of mapping towards analog building blocks and native gates in a more automized way.
You mentioned that BASF, you realized that there are about 100 different use cases that you found. But earlier in our discussion, we were talking about chemistry. Is your focus chemistry algorithms for now, or is it broader to other types of applications?
So our technological columns are applicable to essentially every industry problem. So we did a lot of benchmarking work trying to find out where the limitations of the technology are. And of course, there are some problems here and there which don't lend themselves particularly well to our approach. But I would assume that the vast majority of fundamental problems can be solved and simplified and compressed using our technologies. Of course, as a chemist, this industry vertical is particularly dear to my heart. So we think that this is certainly something where we would like to start, but we are not limited to that. We also did some recent work on portfolio optimization, for instance, for the financial industry. And I think for us now, the question is, and that kind of again depends on the use cases, since we are all about making stuff very specific. We want to look at different problems, working with different companies from chemicals, pharma, but also finance, logistics, manufacturing, to essentially identify where the compression potential of our technology uh, applied on the real problems is the biggest. And this, of course, will then tell us which of these different use cases is going to be the first to help us achieve quantum advantage. And that's more or less what we are going to do right now. The likelihood that this is somehow related to chemistry is reasonably high in my perspective, and I would like to see this because at the very beginning of my career, I didn't mention that I also worked in a startup using classical computing to do material modeling. I really enjoyed the benefits, but I also ran into some severe issues because of the accuracy limitations when we were trying to find blue emitting materials. So I know that these issues exist, and I would like to see it be in chemicals for the first, but could also be finance or machine learning or something entirely different.
In one of the interviews that I read that you gave, you mentioned the GPU, the graphic processing unit playbook. What did you mean by that?
I think the nice thing about GPUs is that it's also a spirit where you are very, very efficient in a way. So I think GPUs is about solving a problem which is also complex, like graphics rendering essentially, using small chip architectures. And of course, the rationale for GPUs is that smaller chips are more inexpensive than larger ones. So you can make much more cost efficient process if you're doing this kind of mix and match approach and tailoring of chip architecture as well as algorithms towards the problem. I think in the quantum space where we are, of course, still limited by the number of chip sizes in a way, it's not so much about saving costs. It's about lowering that threshold for solving real problems to the point where it more or less intersects with the hardware's abilities to deliver. So this is something which I really like.
One last question on the technology. If someone were to try to explain what you do, would it be correct to say that you're doing an optimizing compiler or a transpiler, or would you say that your technology is a completely different type of product?
I think it's a dual step. It certainly has this compression element, so-called digitized counter-diabatic quantum computing that we are doing. But the compilation towards digital analog building blocks is certainly also there. So it's more or less both of these things, I would say.
You mentioned compressing the time to quantum advantage. So the obvious question is, well, how soon? How soon can a customer expect to get some quantum advantage when working with you?
I think the time for that is again depends on the hardware development, of course. But if I'm looking at the current roadmaps, I think there are three front-running technologies: superconducting quantum computers, ion traps, as well as now recently the neutral atoms or the cold atoms, which have been emerging. If at least a fraction of those roadmaps manifest themselves, that I think we can target quantum advantage for first isolated problems, not broad quantum advantage, but first isolated problems in the order of 3 to 5 years. So that's our current assumption. If the hardware development roadmaps hold, and if our compression also holds the same way it has been performing on the smaller problem sizes, and of course the smaller quantum hardware that we've been testing it on.
And because this is hardware specific, have you decided on what technology or vendor you're going to focus on, or are you at the moment working on multiple versions at the same time?
We are working on multiple versions. We think that apart from, of course, there will be one player who will have a hardware platform that is good enough first. There always has to be a winner in a race, but we think that there will also be a mix and match between hardware types and problems at the end of the day. Because some paradigms like ion traps offer very cool all-to-all connectivity, and there are certain mathematical problems that lend themselves very well towards that specific capability. There are other problems where the all-to-all connectivity is maybe more of a nice to have and not used to the fullest extent. So we think that there will be platforms that will be good using our technology for some platform, for some kind of problems, and others for other kinds of problems. So I don't believe that it will be like a one winner takes it all kind of market. From the hardware perspective, it's going to be a portfolio, or it's going to be a number of hardware players in the next few years, claiming quantum advantage with our help, essentially, hopefully, and problem specific always.
If you would tell me a little bit about the company, how large is the company, and how would customers work with you? Is it the product that they buy and then use, or is it more of a project based at this time?
So, as you alluded to, didn't tell this yet, but we recently closed the 3 million pre-seed round, 3 million euro pre-seed round. Always need to say the currency in times of high inflation and especially a very weak euro, but we have now full coffers, and essentially with that already put together a team of 10 FTE essentially. Of course, a lot of physicists in the team, some full stack software developers, some application domain experts, some operations professionals with a lot of track record to essentially build the organization. We want to grow, of course, further than that. And we are already working with first customers. As you can imagine, or as I already said, quantum advantage, even with our technology, is about 3 to 5 years out. So we don't claim that we can solve meaningful problems as of today. So it's more or less project related business model at this point. We think that very soon, as soon as it becomes more apparent which specific hardware platform and which specific problem type it's going to be, we are going to quickly turn our full stack developer that is already on board into turning this into a scalable problem, a scalable product with a kind of enterprise software business model. But for now, it's project based. Our favorite customers, maybe to add that, is I think the companies who already work with quantum computing. So we are less interested in kind of convincing novices, companies who never worked in quantum before to just test it. I think there's already a very vital ecosystem with a lot of companies who do this in a particularly well. I mean, did this myself in earlier days at McKinsey, but that's not the target customers we are approaching. We more or less want to work with the front runners that have been emerging, which have already quantum teams on the ground, which have the capability to know what their use cases are, where we don't need to convince anybody that this is valuable and they have a clear understanding about use cases, because this helps us, of course, to have also clear counterparts in these organizations which can tell us, let's focus on this use case. For this, we would appreciate an application and hardware specific solution, and then essentially work jointly on this.
And speaking of customers in various stages of their quantum journey, have you seen customers that are disappointed, that maybe were believed too much of the hype and tried something, didn't work for them, and now they said, oh, now we're going to put it aside for a few years? Or are most customers still in the haven't tried quantum or working on quantum right now?
I think it's a little bit in between. So I can attest that there are a lot of customers who have been disappointed by overpromising from the ecosystem. So I mean, of course, back then the expectation was maybe a little bit driven by overhypes some years back that there would be not a doubling, but I don't know, 5 or 10-fold improvement or further leapfrogging in the number of qubits that we would have. That didn't happen. It's still a healthy pace, but of course, no miracles happened in the past 3-4 years, and some customers were led to believe that a miracle would occur, which didn't. I didn't see so far that a lot of customers gave up on quantum, mainly because there's uh, there's still this massive opportunity. The carrot is still big and juicy in a way. So that didn't happen to my understanding, but of course, people are now more weary. So, and I think this is also good because it kind of helps to avoid hype if customers don't jump into the arms of everybody claiming miracles in a quarter or two. Customers are more critical, which is good. Some disappointed with past progress, but I've not seen anybody give up on quantum at this point in time. Not quite yet.
And as we get close to the end of our conversation today, you are based in Berlin or two cities in Germany. Where is the company based?
Yes. So the official headquarter is in Karlsruhe, Germany, which is about an hour south of Frankfurt. And we have a second hub in Berlin. Of course, the tech team is extremely international at this point, and of course, for that we wanted to pick the most international city, which is inarguably Berlin in Germany. So this is where the tech team is located, and the commercial activity is mainly driven out of Karlsruhe, which in my humble opinion has much better weather and climate compared to Berlin, which is terrible during winter times.
How can people get in touch with you to learn more about the work that you're doing?
I guess an email is the best way to reach me. First name dot last name at kipu-quantum.com. So feel free to get in touch, and if you want to, if you're interested to learn more about Kipu or what the kind of things we can do. Again, we are not fully loaded yet regarding customers, and we are still hiring. So if you feel that you are either a quantum scientist or a software developer or business professional with a cool background, and you want to make quantum advantage a reality by being application and hardware specific, please be in touch. And I think the same goes out for all mature quantum users who are feeling that pang of disappointment because promises have not been made and who still want to give quantum another shot. So these customers are, of course, also more than welcome to reach out.
Daniel, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Yuval. It was a pleasure.